We really appreciate your being with us today. I think all have a copy of a new publication called Drawing Strength from Our Cultures. The Center for Native American Youth has published this. It's a really good thing to have to finally put together, in some cases, some metrics, and in other cases, very important observations about Native American youth. The Center for Native American Youth is an organization I created nearly 6 years ago. I'll introduce the staff in just a bit, but we're really proud of the work we do. When we go to bed at night, we're convinced we're improving some lives and helping some kids, and that's what life is all about. Do you leave this place better than you found it? And I think of all the people left behind in America, the places that I've been, the corners that I've seen in this country, too often Indian children, the children of the first Americans, have been left behind. And that needn't happen in the future. We can change that. It's in our hands to change that. We have a program today with some panelists and so on, but I want to introduce to you a speaker who agreed to come over and say a few words. She's an extraordinary woman, extraordinary American. She's the Secretary of the Interior. She comes from the state of Washington. I won't give her a long introduction because she's actually on kind of a short leash today. She's going, I think, to the Christmas tree opening or something. She'll tell you about it. But at any rate, this is a woman who is an engineer, married to an engineer. So my guess is their whole life is very orderly with two engineers at work here. But she was a CEO of a significant corporation, the REA, and I'm a member of that. It's a great, great company. She also is an outdoors person. She has climbed Mount McKinley, right?
Not Mount McKinley.
Mount what? Mount Rainier. Mount Rainier 7 times. I mean, why? Just because it's there. But 14,400 and some feet, 7 times. But more importantly to all of us, she's the Secretary of the Interior. It has a portfolio dealing with American Indians. And I'll tell you what, we've had 51 Secretaries of the Interior. I've known 10 of them. And I will tell you, I have not known one that has done more important work on behalf of American Indians, and more important work especially on behalf of Native American youth. This is a better place. Youth are in a better place because Sally Jewell is Secretary of the Interior. I know that her work will end as Secretary soon, but I know her work will not end as an advocate for Native American youth until she finishes all of her work some decades from now. Please help me welcome an extraordinary American, Sally Jewell. Thank you.
Thanks, Byron. It's a privilege and an honor to be with all of you. And we wouldn't have the Center for Native American Youth if it wasn't for Byron Dorgan. A lot of politicians end up with a little money in their bank account when they finish these jobs, and they do different things with it, but Senator Dorgan did this with it. And that's why we're all here, and why this very important work that has happened over the last 6 years and is going to happen in a big way in the future is organized through the Aspen Institute. So thank you, Senator Dorgan, for doing this, and to Eric, who I spent several hours with. Captive. We were both captive. He and your husband, were together with me in an airplane row. Where were we going? Was it Seattle? Back to Seattle. Yeah. So we had a really lovely chat. I didn't know what he did. Were you officially even announced? Just started. Okay. So that was really delightful. And while normally I don't strike up long conversations on airplanes because time is really valuable in these jobs, that was really valuable time, and I can't think of a better way to spend it. I want to thank all of you, especially the Native youth that are here, for bringing your voices in such a powerful way to the country over the last couple of years in particular. Whether you're part of Unity, hopefully, I won't ask for a show of hands of how many of you have taken the Gen I challenge, but I suspect a lot of the people, if not all of the Native youth in this room have. And what we've seen over the course of a very short period of time is an awakening of the pride that you have in your cultures. Some of you may have native languages, some of you may not. I know that your federal government worked very, very hard to drum out native language and culture over the course of over 100 years. And hopefully we're not too late We are too late for some languages. We're not too late for all. And so what I have seen in the Native youth that I've had the privilege of spending time with is this sense of pride. And I hope what Senator Dorgan and I know is a sense of understanding of your power, because your voices are really important, especially in this city, especially with elected officials from around the country, because you matter. And your history is American history. And it predates, obviously, any of the history that is told in our history books. And we'd love to see a situation where your histories, your rich histories and background, become a part of the curriculum of all schools, so that we as a nation take pride in our indigenous cultures. So I am just enormously proud of what you have been doing, and I can't encourage you enough to stay involved. One of the things that is kind of fragile, and I'm concerned about making sure we keep the momentum going, is what we're doing to reform Indian education. For many, many decades, over 100 years, our education system has been designed around assimilation. It's not been designed to honor Native cultures and languages. Started, of course, with the horrific circumstances around boarding schools. That's been pretty well documented. Now, sometimes, perhaps as a result of that, our boarding schools are the only safe havens for some kids that would rather be in school 12 months of the year in a safe place than go back to a community where they don't feel safe. That's a travesty. The only way we're going to make sure that Native cultures thrive in the future and people take pride in those cultures is nurturing cultures, but also setting up young people for success in the world that we have today. So that means a strong academic background and a strong cultural background, including hopefully Native languages. So we're taking it on with the Bureau of Indian Education. That's the part that I control within Interior. You've got a terrific new leader in Tony Dearman, who I met first when he was running the Riverside Boarding School in Anadarko, Oklahoma. But he has been a champion for change, to use a term coined from this organization, for Native youth and advocacy for Native youth. He really understands, but he's brand new in the job, and people oftentimes supporting him are our own employees that work in the Bureau of Indian Education that are resistant to change. So he's going to need support, and I'm going to have his back even when I'm done with this, because this really needs advocacy. So we're turning tribal education away from federal control to tribal control over time, because we think no one cares more about culture and language and young people than tribal communities themselves. But we also understand that education's tough, and how to do that right requires expertise. And we have some real bright spots. The Mississippi Choctaw is a bright spot. We've used Phyllis Anderson, the chairwoman, chief actually, of that tribe, to help us understand what worked well there. And we've done that, collecting success stories around Indian country, and we're bringing those to bear through the Bureau of Indian Education, which is going from a direct provider of services to a organization that is focused on supporting tribes and the educational needs of young people. So that's 9% of tribal youth. Most of the tribal youth here, I suspect, were educated in public schools. And there's a few examples. Anybody here from the Spokane tribe? No. So I was visiting the Spokane tribe not long ago. I went to the local public school, and they were doing a powwow in the public school, and they were jerking elk in the back 40. The kids were all involved, whether they were tribal youth or non-tribal youth, and the superintendent of schools there and the principal were not Native, but they fully embraced that culture. That's where we need to go to make sure that tribal youth educated in state school systems are given a strong education, but also a strong cultural background. So I ask you, I plead with you to stay involved with tribal youth issues, to continue with Gen I, to be active. You can be active in a variety of different ways. You can be activist, like the runners from North Dakota that made their case for the Dakota Access Pipeline situation. You can be active by putting on a suit or putting on your regalia and meeting with members of Congress on Capitol Hill. And you may not feel like it's making a difference, but as the senator knows, it is making a difference. And there's a saying that I learned when I was calling on members of Congress here about the importance of public lands. That is, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Because there's not enough resources to go around, and if you're not there saying we need resources, they're going to go someplace else. And some of those someplaces else have big budgets and can hire lobbyists. But we are a representative democracy, and individual voices and collective voices through grassroots action speaks more than the dollars that might flow into campaigns. And that's why your voices are really important. So I encourage you to stay inspired, just as you've inspired me through your actions as tribal youth leaders, to continue to get to know each other across cultures, across state boundaries, sometimes even across international boundaries, as we've got tribal communities in Canada and Mexico that are part of the tribes that are here, so that we can keep the momentum going that you have started through Gen I, through CNA, and through your commitment to a brighter future for the next generation that's coming up behind you. So I'm enormously proud of you, and you won't have seen the last of me. I did enjoy the powwow sweat. My picture apparently is in the book here from when we hosted Native Youth here. But I will stay involved because I've just been so inspired by your engagement and the difference that you've made. So it's a privilege to be here. You're going to hear from some terrific tribal youth leaders that I just had the privilege of meeting, both actually from my corner of the country, as it turns out, the Pacific Northwest, but they're representative of tribal youth leaders all over this nation that are making a difference directly through their actions. So thank you very much, Senator Eric, CNA, and all the tribal youth that are here. I hope you have a great afternoon, and I won't be a stranger. You'll see me around. Thank you.
Madam Secretary, thank you very, very much. We really appreciate you being here today, and thank you for your inspiring words. That when, I think this is working. Oh, I have a microphone on. Many of you know that when we created the Center for Native American Youth, the first executive director of the center was Aaron Bailey. And Aaron served for the first five and a half years with a terrific staff that we will introduce today to you as well. But Aaron moved back to Minnesota, to Minneapolis after she was married. And, you know, people thought, well, Aaron has done such a great job, maybe she's impossible to replace. But no one's impossible to replace. I found that out when I left the Senate. And we were able to hire Eric Stegman, who has assumed the role of directing the Center for Native American Youth, and he's done a masterful job, really a terrific job. And I feel blessed every day to have not only Eric, but have a terrific staff that runs this nonprofit organization that I believe is making life better across the country for Native American youth. So let me call on Eric to say a few words to you, and then we're going to have a panel and have a pretty free-flowing discussion about the issue of Indian culture. Eric Stegman. Eric, thank you.
I'm actually going to go ahead and ask our panel to start to get seated here while I just say a few words here. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming today. We really appreciate you joining us here. My name is Eric Stegman. My family's from the Carry the Kettle First Nation in Saskatchewan, and this actually marks my one-year anniversary with CNA. It's been an incredible year. Went by very quickly, and I am so proud of the work that we do here today, and I think you'll see a lot of that in this panel discussion. I want to start, though, by introducing the best team in the universe that I get to work with. So if they can stand, I'd like to introduce our staff, Ryan Ward, maybe Josie Rafaelito, Amber Richardson, and Teddy McAuliffe. I don't know if you're here. Okay, some of them are actually out working still. And Bettina Gonzalez, who is our Newman's Own Foundation Fellow, who, I kid you not only managed the development of the beautiful report in front of you, but actually designed it as well. So a big thank you to her as well. So today I'm going to go ahead and take my seat here and transition into our panel discussion. Today, Senator Dorgan and I are going to facilitate a discussion that really points to the focus of the report this year. Just to give you a little background, the State of Native Youth Report is our new annual report that's going to be our platform every year to really share what we're learning directly from Native American youth across the country with you. And the theme this year was really pretty obvious when we actually sat down and thought about it, and when we did a national survey of our youth this year. Culture, 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 and why culture matters. It is absolutely imperative to the success of Native American youth, and I hope that this conversation that we have today is going to explore some of those themes and topics, and I recommend that you explore this a little bit further in our report in front of you, and you can download it at cnay.org as well. I'm going to start, though, by asking all of our panelists here today to just introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about the role that culture plays in your lives, and tell us a little bit more about why Native American culture in your own community is so critical to achieving your own success and the success of youth in your community. And we're going to go ahead and start with Felicia on my right.
Chela, Huinu, Felicia, Wa'amnashi. Hello everyone, my name is Felicia Howell, and I am the former Junior Miss Sluts for the year of 2015-2016. I'm glad to be here today, and it's awesome to see so many people in here. Some of the reasons that I think culture is important for our communities and our youth to know about is because when people say culture is prevention, it really is. Culture is prevention, and it's something that us Native American youth should definitely be able to cherish and hold on to deeply, because without our culture, what do we have? Over in my community, culture is definitely a big thing. It's a big thing for me. I've always been involved in my culture since I was young, and I'm so glad, because without my culture, I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be doing the things that I'm doing or pursuing the dreams that I am trying to pursue. And so, thank you.
Thank you, Felicia. And then to her right is Leslie, who's joining us from the great state of Minnesota.
Kitanimakunanim ginawasa, Nina sa sagajiwe gaboekwe. Gatkosha, Idishamakea, Minnesota walking, Ojibwe walking, and Dunjiba. Niminwendan, Bishayanamasa, Gaego give me Guichue inanim ginawa, Gashawinamagoyanamasa. I'm Leslie Harper. I am Leech Lake Ojibwe from Minnesota, and I had to settle myself into this space and speak my language and let you know who I am, and also let the spirits of the area know who I am, and thank them for letting me be here today and to join all the rest of you here as well. I find that doing that when I travel around somewhere so far from home really does center me and really does settle me. It tells me who I am, so I don't get lost in any of these strange streets or any of these strange places. And it brings the strength of my family and my community with me, because I know that I'm connected to our Ojibwe relatives and our other Indigenous relatives of the nation, and that I stand for them when I go forth. I was told that by an elder in our community, that I as well speak for others, that I've been given the gift of gab. In Zami Dune, I kind of go on and on, but I'm supposed to use that to speak for others. So it reminds me of my responsibilities to my community and my responsibilities to other people, to always be helping out to grow things. I think that's one really strong statement on the strength of our Ojibwe culture and on any of our Indigenous cultures of this nation. We recognize that connection and those responsibilities, which in turn drive our activities and drive our actions. Then I'll stop now. Great.
Great. Nick, tell us a little bit about your background.
Hi, my name is Nicholas Courtney. I'm a member of the Macaw Nation and Hunter Clan. My grandmother is Louise Thompson. My grandfather is Clarence Vernon Courtney II. I think for me personally, culture has been something that has grounded me and, again, given me that sense of identity no matter where I am, a connection to the environment, being from the Pacific Northwest and being located right on the ocean in the Salish Sea, and our connection to the salmon and the sea life there really is a strong connection, something that I will always advocate for. We are salmon people, and understanding that background and our connection to our physical place is something that I think definitely encourages me and my work forward, as well as working with youth and solidifying their own self-identity and having them know who they are as Indigenous people.
Great, thank you. And Senator Dorgan, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks to the three of you. I mean, you can just sense in what you say your deep interest and connection with the culture. And our country has, a pretty shameful history on these issues. We have, at times, punished people for celebrating their culture, punished Native Americans, prohibited them from celebrating their culture. We've done so many terrible things. And finally, it seems to me there's more of an awareness that it not only has to be permitted, it's, the constitutionally permitted, but it's also such an important investment in Native American lives to understand the culture and celebrate the culture. I want to talk just for a minute about Felicia and the Indian Child Welfare Act, because ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act, we've held a number of meetings about ICWA this past year because it's been under some attack by people that want to get rid of ICWA. In fact, there's a nonprofit organization out west that spends a lot of time and money describing ICWA in a manner that is terribly unfair and distortive, but they're working very hard to get rid of it. So the Indian Child Welfare Act for me is very, very important. We need to fight to keep it. And Felicia, you, and I hope you don't mind, and I know that your father Jerry is here, we talked before, hope you don't mind us talking about that as an example of how ICWA is such an investment in culture. You and your two brothers you were adopted, and that adoption occurred 14, 15 years ago for you. One brother was just a week-old baby or something, and the other not much older. And so can you tell us about your experience? And I know it's been a very happy experience, and you've grown into a wonderful young woman who celebrates your culture. But part of that is also this issue of adoption and the importance of ICWA for Indian children. Can you talk a little about your experience in that regard?
Yeah. So when I was younger, my parents, Jerry and Brenda, they had adopted my little brother, or they had Josh Lee, and me and my other brother, Apollinar, were still traveling through the foster care system. We were lucky enough to end up with our younger brother together because we had this wonderful family that had adopted us, and I'm very happy that through ICW we stayed with the Native American family, because if we would have been, we traveled through foster homes, and there was foster homes where they were not Native American and they were not good experiences. But through ICW, we ended up with Brenda and Jerry, and being with them for my whole entire life has been the best experience, and I'm so grateful that me and my brothers have ended up with them. Not being placed in a non-Native home isn't always the best for Native American youth, because sometimes when you end up in non-Native American home, they don't have that sense of culture. They don't get that culture that they need, it's part of their lives. And I don't know, it's sad, for lack of better terms, it's sad that they don't get to experience what me and my brothers have the pleasure of experience. And so having the Indian Child Welfare Act is something that is so important for us Native American youth, and I can't express in words how grateful I am. And so having the Indian Child Welfare Act is definitely something positive, even though people can distraught it, I guess is the word.
Felicia, you are 17 years old?
I'm 18, or I'm 17. Not 18 yet, yes, I'm 17.
You are wise way, way above your age. I mean, you speak, I mean, I understand exactly what you said because I think I understand what you feel. And I was just sitting here thinking at age 17, if someone had asked me to speak to a group, I would have had a major heart attack. I learned to speak a little later, but thank you for telling that story. There's so many tough stories out there that kind of break our hearts. Thanks for this story, because this story kind of lifts us up. Jerry, thank you and your family, and it describes the importance of ICWA. Thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you, Felicia. Really appreciate you sharing that story, and I know how personal it is. Leslie, I met you at the National Indian Education Association convention back in October, and was absolutely inspired by the work that you and your partners and other tribes are doing with your language immersion school. And I think, you know, when young people like Felicia talk about the importance of culture to young people, I think a lot of times for people that aren't as connected with it, they don't understand some of those specific ways that we mean when we're talking about how culture impacts young people's lives. And I think your immersion school is just a fantastic example of that. And I'd love for you to just share a little bit about it if you could.
Thanks. Where do I begin? I was just bragging at lunchtime. I was bragging that our first cohort of students in our Ojibwe language immersion school are now high school seniors this year. So it's been quite a journey. Our school at home, our Nigani Ojibwe language immersion school, we started out with a kindergarten cohort of students and added a grade each year and grew it up through the 6th grade. And then we didn't have enough teachers in the community. We didn't have enough for all these specific content area teachers and this and that. So we created a transition plan for our students to go out to English language medium schools in the area. So since 2004, our Ojibwe language immersion school has been, we started that in 2004, and we've grown it since then. But we take the kids through 6th grade, and then they go out to English language schools in the area. So to see our first class of students as seniors in high school, and they are still at this point outperforming Minnesota's English language medium educated students. We have a they're on track to graduate. We have a higher percentage of students from our first class, outperforming Minnesota's Native American statistics, number of AP courses taken, colleges, they're on track. 2-3 of our students are in post-secondary education. So they're taking college courses while they're in high school, and that requires that they're in a certain top percentage of their class, and that they're able to attend. So they're taking university courses in 11th and 12th grade. They're getting a jump start. So definitely, I just love to brag about these students, and they're confident, and they're friendly, and they're kind. And again, they're just really good representatives for our communities, dedicated to service learning and to community service. And that's a result that a lot of the other community members, that a lot of the adult generation community members have commented on as well, is that the students who've come out of our Ojibwe language immersion track, the ones who've been in that track for a 5 to 7 year period of their lives, they're confident. They're strong. They're confident in any situation in which they find themselves, which is really different from what we're seeing in a lot of our Native students who are attending the English medium, the public schools, that aren't given as much attention to our Ojibwe culture. So we know there's something in there that's working well for our kids, but we get a lot of comments from folks in the community. These kids are confident, these kids are strong, these kids are driven, and they're not arrogant in any way. It's just that they're solid in who they are, and they enter a lot of different areas. They've been in panel situations like this, and we've had kids who have testified in front of House Finance Committees in favor of bills on language appropriations. We have kids who go before their peers, which I think is probably a much harder audience than going before like a tribal council. You know, for a teenage kid or a middle school kid, it's probably a lot more difficult to go before your peers in your student council body. But they go before our tribal councils, you know. They're just amazing.
That's great. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think, you know, this says a lot about what we do at Center for Native American Youth all year long. We hold roundtables and youth summits across the country throughout the year. And one of the first things that comes up everywhere we go is I want language programming. And I think it speaks a lot to some of the successes, too, that are out there, like the recent reauthorization of our education law, which provides new funding for these kinds of programs. And I think it's just exciting to see what this looks like in action in a community like yours. So really appreciate that.
Nick, well, first of all, you have the best socks of the panel. Just an observation. Thank you. That's not cultural, probably, but well, maybe it is.
Being in DC, it's the only way of self-expression.
It's true. We all wear suit and ties, don't we? Let me ask you, and I wasn't going to ask this question today, but I want to ask you through the eyes and the feelings of a 24-year-old Native American, how you interpret and see and what lessons do you take from the current protests that are going on at the Standing Rock Reservation?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think, and in my experience of working with youth, I think it really solidifies the leadership role that our youth are taking and leading the way. I think that it shows the revitalization of culture within our upcoming generations for our youth leaders to really lead the way in this fight. I was fortunate enough to travel to Standing Rock and be at the camps with Miss Jordan Marie Daniels in the crowd, and was also able to meet the group of runners that came. Brilliant individuals, intelligent, proud, and I think that's all because it's rooted in culture. They know who they are, they know where they're from, they have a value system that reflects community values, and I think it's just a great thing to see, and I have a lot of faith in this upcoming generation and the generation with my age of people to really continue this work and expand upon it and lead.
I don't think anyone knows yet how that all gets resolved. I asked that question because when the Secretary was here, she observed of having the runners come to Washington. But it is a public issue that has grown to significant importance, attracting tribal members from many tribes throughout the country. And it is not just, it certainly is not just some sort of economic issue in which there's a dispute. This has a lot to do with culture and is rooted in the middle of these kinds of discussions about culture. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I was out at Standing Rock in September myself, and what I was struck with was everything that was bigger than just this one pipeline situation. I mean, it was amazing to go talk to the Youth Lodge where you had multiple groups of Native young people coming through at different times, meeting one another, much like we have when we bring our Champions for Change around the country and they get to actually connect with other youth. And the big conversations that were happening with elders, with youth. I think it was really this cultural conversation that I don't think any of us have seen before, at least in my generation. And I just love that youth sparked that movement. And I think we're really hoping to keep that momentum going beyond just this current situation. I wanted to kind of pose a question to the entire panel. Actually, speaking specifically to that as a segue. Do any of you work with elders in your community? I think that one of the real powers of Native culture is what we do intergenerationally with young people, and the power of bringing elders into language and other kinds of programming. And I'd just love to hear about any kind of work that any of you have done with elders in your communities.
Okay. So over out in Sluts, I think most, I don't know, but we have an elders program over out in Sluts. So it's pretty cool. We take care of our elders a lot. I like speaking with our elders all the time, always hearing what they have to say and hearing what they have to say about our generation now. And it's kind of interesting speaking with them because they're so wise and they're so much older than me, and they never had the opportunity that I get now. Because back then, I mean, we, as a tribe, were not restored yet. And so hearing them go through restoration and being restored and all of that is just an amazing experience. I always like talking to our elders. They're funny.
And do you find that other youth that you work with in the community like to work with elders? Are there other kinds of programs that you've seen out there that you guys work on with them? Do you do any kind of community activities with them?
We have healthy traditions, and so we have a garden, and a lot of the elders go work in the garden and gather foods from the gardens, and occasionally we'll have I don't know how to explain it, but we all come together and we'll make a meal out of our traditional foods and everything that we've gathered from the garden stuff, and so we'll do that occasionally, and so it's really awesome to get to work with them. So
that's amazing, and that's one of the top things that we heard in our online survey, and always when we go to meet with youth and communities is they want to bring back their traditional foods, and it's just great to hear that elders are working with you on those as well. That's great. And I wanted to also ask, one of the things that we hear from Native youth across the country are programs to connect them with culture. So we have a lot of Native youth who live off the reservation. There's sometimes very different kinds of opportunities. Sometimes they're really lacking, and youth really understand that connection to culture really can help them through a lot of issues, even when they're off the reservation. And so I'm wondering if any of you work with programs where you're either connecting youth to cultural opportunities in urban areas or bringing them back to reservation, or I know, Nick, you work with some programs here in DC too, so I'd love to hear about some of those kinds of opportunities.
Yeah, so I work with George Washington University, and I direct the Inspire Native Teens initiative. It originally started as an online platform to have individuals share their story and share their encouragement for teens finishing high school and graduation. And it turned into a 3-week summer program where 10 to 12 Native high school students come to DC. They take a class in Native politics taught by Native faculty at GW. And then every evening we do either cultural activities with the local tribes in this area or with cultural experts from different organizations. And then we also bring them kind of a backdoor scenes and behind organizations such as CNAY, NCAI, congressional members, the Department of Education, and kind of give them a backdoor scene of how those offices advocate on behalf of Native communities. I think that when I first came to DC, I was privileged to be paired with a mentor, again, who's here. So I want to shout out to Patricia Teen back there, who's...
Where's Patricia?
Patrice right here. And so we pair each of our students with a Native mentor that works in a DC office. And I think that really just, one, shows them that and Native people can be advocates here in DC in a place that's not their home, but there's a community here that makes it feel like home, whether those are just individuals getting together or traveling for powwows in the local area. But I think that embedded in that, our students come with a great appreciation for their culture, which is incredible and makes my working extremely privileged work to be able to work with young people who, again, are brilliant and are really leading that change in their own community. And I think that culture itself, when we talk about that, is incredible in the organization that I work with, because students come from all over the country. They come from, they're Native Alaskan, Native Hawaiian. We have students from, again, a wide array who deal with similar issues in their own communities. And I think that it's interesting for them to share dialogue and to share resources and things like that with each other, and have culture be rooted in that. And how I remember my first week, it was funny because you get us all in the kitchen and, okay, who wants to make fry bread? And we're arguing over okay, I don't cook without bluebird flour.
Right,
and
yeah, of course.
That looks a little too thin, or that's a little too thick. We're not making donuts, we're making fry bread. And so it's great to see and share those cultures through food, through song, through dance, and kind of get a greater appreciation for it all, and how it's rooted in similar things, but very different among each other.
Great, thank you.
Leslie, I would like you to teach Eric and myself some Ojibwe. I'd like you to teach us to say, are there questions from the audience? How would one say that?
Well, that's a little more simple. There's a little less conjugation involved because it's a yes or no question. That's as simple as it gets, because I will tell you, you'll have to say Geguna, Wani Gagwe. So Geguna, Wani Gagwe.
I didn't get that last part.
Yeah, that's the cool verb. That's the very cool verb.
Say just the last word.
Gagwe.
I'd have to, yeah.
Any questions that you have? That's what that is.
All right, we've
Have
now
any
asked you in
questions?
Ojibwe whether you have any questions, so we'd like to open it to the audience for questions.
So I heard you guys touch on the topic of natives that don't live on the reservation, but basically, I'm from...
Can you tell us your name, please?
My name is Connor Tuppence. I'm from the Upper Mattapanai, and Chickahominy tribes down in Virginia. And it was just on the topic of Indian education and how kids that don't live on the reservation and don't have the access to tribal schools, whether it's just because they may be a state-recognized tribe or don't have the funding, or don't have grants available to get that funding. Is there anything that could be done to help out those Native youth that may not be culturally active but do not live on the reservation? And that was to the whole panel.
Leslie, do you look like you're going to say something there?
Thank you for asking that, because we get those questions all the time as well. Well, this is all available here, but maybe for my Leech Lake tribe, not even half of our people live on or near the reservation. We're spread out. We're highly concentrated in other metro areas in our state, across the United States. So we get a lot of that same kind of question, like, well, you have it really strong there and you have a concentration of people. How do we access that? We did some projects with our students, with our kids, and they were young. Remember, I told you about my school. We had kindergarten through 6th grade students. So, we would visit other schools. And we would make a relationship with other schools in other areas, and muddle our way through Skype, sometimes when the Skype wouldn't work, just a conference call. So we'd have a telephone in the middle of the room. I mean, we would find ways to do that. And we're getting more of an awakening and more of these requests for cultural experiences. So we're becoming more intent about reaching out and making those relationships. And we have exchange programs. we have a concentration of students in St. Paul, Minneapolis area. Their Indian Education Department, it's so funny that we say that, an exchange program, but it was like urban Indians and rural area reservation Indian students, where we had to be really deliberate. We have to create these opportunities now, where we had to set up plans and set up all these ideas where we'll get those kids of ours back home for a week or a 2-week or a 3-week experience on the land with everyone and working on language opportunities. And the same way we try to show our kids who live on the reservation, the world doesn't stop at the reservation border. Some of these kids have never seen an urban area, or they've never seen anything outside of the border town, So we try to do the same thing and take them out and say, there are safe communities out here. There are great places for you to go and be Ojibwe just as well over here. But you got to really concentrate on it and find those partners and just recreate those relationships.
And one of the things I love about the work that we do here at the center, and I was just honored to be able to take on this role was that we work with youth across the country who are in urban and reservation communities. For us, it's if you're a Native youth, you get to join our organization, and if you're a friend of a Native youth, you get to. And I think, one of the things that I've been really inspired about are the young people that we see who are putting forward those ideas about, how do we start this and who do we work with as partners. And so we have a Champion for Change from this year, which was our program where we honor 5 outstanding Native youth across the country each year, and his name's Sam Slater, who has a program where he takes youth from his largely non-Native school here in the DC area out to Navajo, where he's from. And it's a tremendous learning opportunity, kind of an exchange program. And I know that he's had other Native youth who've thought about this and how do we, in an urban area like Minneapolis or something, work with folks like you, but then what do we need to do for resources? How do we contact organizations like the Center for Native American Youth to connect us with the kind of folks and organizations who can make that happen? So we also use that to just say, Native youth, give us your ideas, because we want to help connect you with all of these people that we're connected with. So, yeah, maybe right there.
Hi, my name is Frances Curley. I'm First Nations Algonquin, and I work with the National Council of Urban Indian Health. And so, I could speak louder. Okay. That's really loud. So I just wanted to say there's also we represent urban Indian organizations. And so in a lot of populated areas, like we have an urban Indian health program in Baltimore, and they don't only do health things, they also do community events. Like they just had a Thanksgiving event last week. And it was really touching when they did a pipeline protest by the I guess when they were in the court for the injunction, I had the director of the Baltimore program come down with me, and we went over there, and she knew everyone, all the Native people there, even though they were from different tribes all over the United States, state recognized, unenrolled, but still Native. There was a huge community, and so there are organizations that are there, and Virginia, I don't think has one currently, but that's something that should happen, and funding of course is always an issue, but there are groups as well. I just wanted to say that.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Nick.
If I may add, I think that. And thank you for the question. I think that after reading the report last night, it was interesting to see many students were a very small population. I attended public school. My elementary school in the same district was 60% Native. My middle school was 0.5% because I went to a different middle school. So I think that being such a small population and so distributed is one thing that I think that's where that intentionality comes in. And I think that also in the report, it was the majority of students feel like climate, like school climate, not just like environmental climate, but school climate is an issue. And I think tied with that, currently there's over 2,400 schools in the U.S. with Native mascots or Native imagery. And I think that is an issue that that has been talked about and is continued to be talked about. But I think that in those schools where there's such a small percentage of Native students, however, they have Native mascots or Native imagery, I think that those Native mascots and imagery speak for those students long before that those students can speak for themselves. And I think that in that regard, you as a student have an immense amount of power to speak with your school board representatives, to speak with your teachers, to your counselors, to let your opinions be known, because I don't think that there's, in a school, I don't think there's anyone more powerful than you as a student. So, yeah.
Well said. In the back.
I'm in long-time interest in Native American issues. I've been fortunate to visit the Nia Bay area and stayed at your wonderful Makah lodging on the coast there. And there were two issues of dealing with preserving cultural traditions there. One was, whether research on ocean wave technology should proceed, and secondly, the whole issue on whaling, the preservations. I wonder if you could address that. And secondly, with so many successful casinos on Indian reservations, I wonder if there's a dialogue with the president-elect who, unfortunately has had failed casinos in Atlantic City. And I just wonder, is that something that might be discussed?
I'll let you talk about maybe whaling.
Yeah.
And I'll address the other one.
So I in no way speak for my tribe. I am a tribal member, but I do not speak for them. I was present in 2001, and I did not grow up in Nia Bay. My family is all there. However, I did not grow up there. But I was there when we successfully hunted a whale, and I was on the beach when we pulled that up, and that's something that I will never forget, to see ceremonies and to see songs that are only for that situation. I've never seen so many people on the beach out in Nia Bay. It's a very small place, population of around 1,000, but there were 1,000 people on that beach. I think that it deals, that issue, and I'm no way a lawyer, but I do know that whaling is in our treaty. It's Section 8, and it says that we're allowed our right to whale. I know that the gray whale was also on the endangered species list, and while it was, we did not petition, and we respected that. I think that in a longer way, the big trigger words is sustainability. I think in academia, or that in the last couple of years, like everyone wants a system of sustainability. This college is doing sustainable work, and like, what does that mean? Well, indigenous ways have always been sustainable. I don't think it's because of the Makah people that the gray whale went extinct, or was even put on the endangered species list. And I don't think that Native peoples have ever put a animal at risk in that regards, because those are our relatives. We rely on them. In terms of casinos, which I'll be very brief on because, again, it's not my expertise and I will not pretend that it is. I think that for those fortunate enough to have casino dollars and make those funds, I've seen them put to beautiful uses in terms of schools and education, in terms of infrastructure, and I think that is a positive thing. I don't think, and would like to debunk the myth that just because someone is a tribal member, that they get that they're getting a check every month. I've never gotten a check. I didn't get my college paid for. So I want to debunk that myth that even if you do have a casino, it doesn't mean that you're raking in dollars. In terms of the upcoming president, I think it'll be interesting, and I think that tribes will be strategic in that regard.
Let me make a comment on the Indian gaming issue. There's, 550-some tribes, Indian tribes in the United States, roughly. I think somewhere around half of them, or 250 or so, have gaming facilities. That comes about as a result of the Cabazon decision by the Supreme Court, brought by the Cabazon tribe, which said that they have a constitutional right with certain permits from the state to engage in gaming on the reservations. It's really important, I think, to understand. Some people think because there is Indian gaming, that every tribe that has a casino someplace is making a lot of money. It's just not the case. The fact is, many tribes are remotely located. They have a gaming facility. It produces a small stream of income, often not very much. There are a handful or a couple handfuls of tribes that have very large facilities near very large metropolitan areas that I'm sure have robust streams of income. But it is not the case that most Indian gaming is unbelievably profitable and produces big streams of income which go back into helping the Native American people. It's supported, should be supported because it's helpful, but it is not nirvana.
And before we go to the next question, I just want to tell a little personal story that Nick might not know about me. I grew up in Seattle. My great-grandfather went to a boarding school up at a First Nation in Saskatchewan. And I think a lot of what we're seeing with what happens in our organization is the power of Native youth from a lot of different cultures to really connect and inspire one another. And when I was a little kid, I knew I always wanted to do something in tribal issues. But I grew up when the macaw whale hunts were happening. And it got me so angry. That was the day I decided I wanted to be a Native lawyer. And exactly everything that Nick talked about was what really just got me riled up, and I saw young people in that movement. I was a young Native man, and I knew I wanted to do this for Native people across the country, and that's the kind of thing we're seeing at places like Standing Rock and other places. Just to kind of give you a little of that historical context, I think is so important, so it was a great question. I think we had this one, and then we'll go to...
My name is David Lautenberger. I just really had a comment and an observation, or a couple of them. First, just a side story. My son is presently in New Zealand, and I just got an email from him from Auckland. He was at the airport in Auckland, and he encountered 10 Maori indigenous folks who had just returned from Standing Rock. And they were wearing hand-painted Stand with Standing Rock shirts. So, what's happening in North Dakota is not just happening in North Dakota. It's really so cross-cultural. It's a unifying effort, and to run into folks in the other side of the world who have just come from Standing Rock was really an awesome experience for my son, and I just wanted to share that with you. And that this gentleman, young man from Virginia, I just wanted to emphasize to him, he was looking for help and support because his tribe is not nationally recognized or federally recognized, and it's also often difficult to get support. But what I've seen from CNAY in my own experiences is that it only takes one person. It only takes one person, and from what I heard you speak, you're very intelligent and very motivated person. It only takes one person to get something started, and everybody who works with youth should find examples. They're not hard to find. There are many of them. Dakota Brown from CNAY is the classic example, I think. But I stress to the young people that one person can really honestly make a difference. If you're dedicated and if you want to make a difference, you can.
Okay, thank you. We have a question back there. I recognize you.
Hello, it's really great to be here, and I'm a parent, and I have raised my family in the Washington, D.C. area, and being in this bubble, it has been quite an up and down experience with the recent election. And I want to direct this question to the senator. And first, I'd like to very much thank him for everything he has done in his life devoted to public service and to American Indians and other issues. I think that we are so grateful for your leadership. And given that you have such sound judgment, I really need to hear as a parent that something inspirational from you about what all of us can take, especially our youth. What do we tell them with this major change that has occurred in our political system for a lot of different reasons? major. And what would be your words of wisdom that you can tell the youth here on the panel, tell us as parents? We really need to have a sense of hope and the fact that we can do something to keep engaged. And I would really love to hear from you in terms of any words of wisdom, because I really need it right now.
Eric, is that for you?
I think that was very directed at you, sir.
I understand.
Yeah, no.
Boy, you know, so I live in the same country and watch the same election on election night. And the next morning, actually I went to bed before it was all over, but it was pretty much over from my perspective. And the next morning I woke up at 4 and went down to the computer and wrote a piece. And at the end of the piece, which I published the next day, at the end of the piece I told a story that is part apocryphal but mostly real of Joe Hill, who was accused of murder in the state of Utah. Joe Hill was a labor organizer, accused of a murder that history and most people think he did not commit, was brought before a firing squad in Utah a century ago, and he was asked the question, do you have any last words? And Joe Hill, this labor organizer, said, tell the boys to organize. And that was my thought the next morning. Organize. You know, life's full of successes and failures. And all of us, I've been through 10 federal elections. I won 6 elections. Well, I won 10 federal elections to the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate from a Republican state as a Democrat. I've been accused of everything you can accuse a human being of, because politics is tough. And there are times in public service, losing big issues just almost destroys you. And yet you just can't let it destroy you. I lost a daughter when I was serving in the Senate. She was 23 years old and lost her to heart surgery. And the fact is, I wasn't sure I'd ever get through that, but I did. It was really hard. It took a long time. But you know, I mean, life is sometimes difficult. This election is, you know, for me it was stunning and shocking. But I'm a student of history as well. And I look at this democracy of ours as an unfinished product. But I've traveled over most of the world, and I don't see anything better anyplace. We occasionally make mistakes, sometimes really big mistakes. We've talked about a couple of them today. When we said to the people who were here first, we're going to put you on reservations, and we're not going to allow you to leave the reservation unless you get a permit from the Department of the Interior. And then we said to them, now you must leave the reservation. We're going to force you off the reservations. And then we said to them, we're not going to allow you to celebrate any part of who you were or who you are or any part of your culture. And to do so will imperil you. I mean, we've done some really unbelievably bad things. And yet, what I keep coming back to is every generation of Americans asks the question, where will the leadership come from? And somehow, through mistakes and through trial and error, we find it. I've often told the story of John Adams, who McCullough wrote about in his book. As we were forming this new country of ours, John Adams was largely in Europe, representing these group of people in the United States that wanted to form their own country. And he was working with the French and the English and so on to try to get help. And he would write back to Abigail, his wife, and from Europe, and he would say, I just don't know. I mean, where is the leadership going to come from for this new country we're trying to put together? Where will the leadership come from? And then in the next letter, he'd plaintively write to her, he'd say, you know, there's only us. There's me, There's Thomas Jefferson, there's George Washington, there's Mason and Madison and Ben Franklin. There's only us. Well, think about that a couple 150 years later, that the only us is really some of the greatest talent in human history, right? And they formed this unusual country that's the only place quite like it on the planet. And we've been successful. We've had setbacks. We've just had really unbelievable successes and very difficult failures. But you know what you do? You get up the next morning, and with a good heart and a determination, you decide to organize. When you talked about one person, I was thinking of the Black Eyed Peas, who do, and I know nobody listens to the Black Eyed Peas anymore, but let's get it started, right? Let's get it started. I'm just a big believer. You absorb what comes at you, and then you, from that absorption, decide, I'm going to make something of this somehow. I'm going to change it if I have to, but I'm going to make something of it somehow. So, I've taken much longer to describe kind of my feelings about this. I'm not a happy guy, but I still feel pretty positive about this country. But it requires that all of us decide that not to find a chair to sit on, but to find a place to stand for things that we know are indelible in terms of the nature of what our country must be. And if we stand for that and fight for that, one person, 100 people, 1 million people, we make a difference. That's the wonderful thing about this place. So anyway, thanks for asking the question. I don't. Well, so when I said one person makes a difference, this is on your shoulders then, all alone. But so when I got up at 4 in the morning to write, I wrote it first for my kids, because I was just so stunned about what went on. I mean, I didn't, and I'll tell you, I'm taking longer than I should, but since you asked the question, issues like banning a religion from coming to our country, or reinstituting torture, or things. I'm not going to talk about the candidate. I'm just going to talk about some of the policies that were out there that were so anathema to me. I never thought in a million years people would buy that. Ever, because I grew up with, and by the way, from my little hometown, 280 people, my county, which is the size of Delaware, almost 3,000 people total, 81% voted for the winner of this election. I was staggered, because I didn't think that would work in where I grew up with the people that I know. So, but I grew up, I got up the next morning writing this mostly for my kids, and of course, as I'm kind of, you said you have the gift of gab. I have fast fingers in the morning on the computer, and so I just kept writing, and I wrote a piece. But this country will be fine, but it's going to require a little nurturing and a little guidance from all of us, and I'm convinced that all of us together will, I won't use the term make America great again, because America's always been great, but we'll keep America on track.
Thank you, Senator Dorgan. So I'm going to use that actually as a really good segue to close us out here. I want to have one more opportunity to hear from everyone in closing. I also want to mention that the woman who asked that question, Faith back there, happens to be the mother of our champion Sam this year, who I was talking about, who takes students out to their home at Navajo. So glad to see her in our audience, and thank you for that question. So I wanted to close by just asking each of our panelists to give us some closing thoughts, and I kind of want to respond a little bit to that too, in really thinking about, I'm really lucky to be in this position, especially in this difficult time in our country, because I get to work with all these young people across the country who are always facing daunting challenges, but they're doing it by inspiring one another. They're taking initiatives of their own. I think Standing Rock is one very good example of a pretty daunting challenge that they're taking on, and I think Native youth have a lot to offer other youth across the country. So I wanted to just ask each of you to share with us, what values from your culture, really inspire you to connect with other Native youth, Or, what message do you have to share to Native youth across the country about the difference that they can make, both to their young people in their own community, but other youth across the country who really want to change the direction of the country with where we're going? Let anyone start.
Great.
Felicia?
I think that connecting with Native youth, not just in your own cultures, but in other cultures, is such an important thing because us together can create something huge. I mean, everybody that has come together for Champions of Change or the unity conferences that you guys have had, I mean, you see so many Native youth there, and it's amazing because it's not just some Native youth going to hang out with people that they came with. It's going to explore and hanging out with everybody and experiencing other people's culture and learning about other people's culture and telling others about your own. It's something amazing to see, and it's something that I love to do. So, thank you.
Kita debwe nendisum hekaheko kita showing about our cultures, and what we would tell each other is we must believe in ourselves, debwe nendiso, believe in ourselves, and showing love one another, which is one of the core values of Ojibwe culture. Showing and doing this caring and this love that comes out of the connections that we all have. And I feel like a big hippie saying this, right? Like the revolution is love. But we have so much healing and so much to come back through and to rebuild through our cultures, that it's not just systems management and systems ops and we got to straighten this out and get that program. Fine, but I mean, where is that? We need to have that belief in ourselves as Ojibwe people and as Makah and as, any of our tribes here. We have to understand that we have a way of connecting with others that is the basis for how we build these community systems and systems of governance and systems of decision making. So it's this really big kind of clinical idea, but it's all based on love because we haven't felt that in a long time. And so, love ourselves and believe in ourselves that we have this. And thank you to the youth, because you know what? The youth always believe in themselves. The youth are fearless, and they always do. They inspire us. These kids, all of our kids at home, they're the ones who believe in us, and it's us kind of parents, and it's us kind of grandparents who hold it up and say, I don't know about that. So keep on believing in yourselves and keep leading us as youth.
Thank you.
Thank you for I think my message to Native youth right now is to just know how powerful they are, how inspiring they are, to myself as another peer, as to their younger generations and their brothers and sisters, to older generations, and that they're powerful, and to trust the imperfections. I think we always, a previous and current mentor of mine always says, like, aim for perfection, but know you'll always fall a little short. It's something that you constantly strive for, and just know that, like I said, you're powerful, that your voice matters. It doesn't matter if you're that 1% in a small school or if you're the entire school. I would encourage everyone to spend time with each other, learning about that cross-culturalness, and to believe where they came from, and know that there's people out here and organizations that are here to support you, and to never doubt that there's not, and to also have the courage to reach out for help, because you can't often see everyone but we are here, and organizations such as CNAY and other incredible organizations are out there that want to support you and that want to see you succeed, because our future is in your hands and in your children's hands and their children's hands. So that's what I would say.
Great, thank you. You have something you want to say?
No, maybe just, thank you. I think all three of you are enormously inspiring, and I really appreciate your coming to spend the lunch hour with us, and appreciate all of you coming. And I was just thinking as well that Robert F. Kennedy, who was the reason the United States Senate created the Indian Affairs Committee, because Robert F. Kennedy went out to visit Indian reservations and showed the plight of Native American youth, and the Senate, as a result of his work, created the Indian Affairs Committee. And he once said, he went to South Africa and he said this, he said, "Each time a man or a woman stands up or speaks out to improve the lives of others, they send forth a tiny ripple of hope." And he said, all of those ripples of hope, forming a center of energy and daring, can sweep away the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. And that quote in South Africa from Robert Kennedy has lived through the ages about the ripples of hope. It kind of comes to what you said and what you said. The things that all of us have the opportunity to do. We're all that ripple of hope for Indian youth and for America. So thank you very much for coming today.
I want to thank our panel and Senator Dorgan today. Thank you for being here. I also want to say we hope to see you back here in February. Our team is diligently working on finding out who our next 2017 champions for change are going to be. So keep your eyes out. Sign up if you haven't for our listservs, and we'll give you all the info about that event, and can't wait to welcome some more youth here again in early next year. And thank you so much for coming.